Welcome everybody. So we are joined today by Nashon Cook. Nashon is, I'm going to read this, so pardon me. Nashon is an author, a poet, and first-generation horseman from Denver, Colorado. Nashon graduated with a Bachelors of Science degree in Human Services from Metropolitan State University. As a horseman, Nashon's interest lay in working with horses with major mental, emotional, and physical training-related trauma. He lives and works out of his family's farm in Parker, Colorado, where he uses his background in classical dressage and rehabilitation to help horses and their people. I wanted to also mention, Nashon is the author of the book Being with Horses. Yes, we have it. It took us so long to get it. We ordered it and it took me months to get it.
Yeah, it's really good. You should all read it.
It's really nice. You should, and he also, you can find him on his Facebook page, which is Nashon Cook Horsemanship.
Indeed.
On Facebook. Yes. So let's see here. Today, we are here to talk about learning to feel. We have so many topics we wanted to talk about, and then we had to narrow it down to one. So we started with this one. Would you guys, before we did this, we had a meeting with Nashon and we connected so much on so many levels. There was so much, we saw that so much common ground and so much we could talk about. We were like, where do we even begin to narrow this down? So we just grabbed the first one that came up. So here we are.
Yeah.
So
well, thank you. Thank you for that lovely introduction.
Yeah, hopefully it's the first of many.
I hope so.
Yeah. So Nashon, I wanted to first start with, how would you define feel?
Mutual consideration. Trust, safety.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's great. That's really interesting.
Yeah, those are the three big things that I try to work with and inside of when trying to help people connect to their horses. Yeah,
you choose very different words than most people would choose.
Actually, let me backtrack. Even, I mean, I started to ride last century, literally. And when I was a teenager and I got my first riding lessons, the dominant view, especially in Germany, was that feel is something you're born with. And if you're not born with it, you're hopeless, you'll never learn it. Is that something you experienced too?
In learning to ride.
I think that's not something that I personally experienced, because I think, ever since I've started riding, I've felt more at home with my horses than I have any place else. Okay. It's just a world that makes sense to me. So yeah, no, that's not something that I grew up with firsthand. I think though but I do think that, like, the instruction that I got, and then the ability that I had to go and just play around and try on horses really helped me a lot. There was a lot of freedom. To just be with them and hang out with them, and I think that it was super important for me, very integral for my development, to see how what I was asking a horse to do made the horse feel, and how they responded to it, and then as it continued on, I began to see them try to answer the question. And so I think the mutual consideration part is where part of the definition of the feel, because you began to see that, like, they're trying and there's a part of the question that they're not quite sure about, but it's not the whole question. And so yeah, so that's kind of I had that freedom to just play and hang out and you know, and that was integral for me.
That's interesting. So you really had to figure things out on your own with the help of the horse. You
For
didn't
the
have
most
somebody
part, yeah.
telling you, do this now, do this now, do this now.
Not every week, right? Because I was I think I was a pretty good rider as a young kid, and I got a lot of time to just practice on my own, and I could check in. You know, there would be clinics that I would do like once a month, and then there was then I would take it wasn't necessarily a lesson, it was more like just like a group practice kind of thing, where my teacher Angel would kind of say, this is what I see, this is where, you know, X, Y, and Z, and then I would have stuff to go and play with. But it was really just a wonderful experiential process for me.
That's interesting. Yeah, so they gave you the permission and the freedom to experiment, and for me it was the exact opposite. You know, we had these group lessons, and the teacher would say, do this and do this and do this.
There was no freedom.
There was freedom. Yeah, actually, they discouraged it. They would basically say, don't dare experiment, because you're going to screw up the horse forever. And, you know, so it was very...
And I think that was kind of where it was, is that I learned to ride in the after school program. And so all the horses were donated. They were already screwed up. And so I got to learn how to fix them, you know? And I think that was where, you know, it was very, very important to me, because like you began to see how dressage applied with you as the part of a circle instead of being the center of a circle, how it has the ability to bring horses' bodies back, you know.
Nice image, that we're part of a circle but not the center. I like that. That's really
interesting. I think that's, you know, that kind of image in my brain is kind of how I try and stay out of egotism. You know, it's how I've learned to keep myself in check.
Exactly that.
That's so interesting. So next question that I wanted to add on to this background is, do you think you can learn how to feel? Because, you know, in my generation, everybody said you can't learn, it's impossible, you're hopeless, but might as well give it up, you know. And
I think that I to prepare for this, actually, I sought the input of a lot of my students, just to kind of see what they thought and how we found it. And I think a big thing for me is, one, learning, you know, the breath for me has a lot to do with a lot of stuff. And so, you know, the pressure as a teacher, you know, I think all of us, need to be safe. I think the student needs to feel safe with the teacher, and I also think that the teacher needs to feel safe with the student. So like that's one thing, so that the environment is available. And then two, I think that really, yes, I do think it's possible, because the thing is that, like, you know, going from that kind of pedagogy where you're born with it, like, if that's something that's ingrained in you, like, you hold it in your chest and you're stuck in your head trying to find it. Right. And like, this is where, like, in our chest, when we're breathing there, like, it's where a lot of belief lives, you know? But I think that if you can, like, kind of take your breath and get connected to the rest of your body, there's a possibility for relaxation. And I think that a lot of feel that a rider has is based on learning how to follow movement first instead of control it. Right. And so, like, if you can walk the person through their breath and tell them where to release in their body, then they begin to feel the horse's hind legs under their seat. And then they start to know where the horse's legs are. And then more importantly, when they don't feel that space, it's usually because they're in their head and we've gotten ourselves back up into emotion. So I think that feel is possible as long as we mind our emotions.
Interesting.
You know, and because, you know, if we go in believing that it's not possible, then you know, then it's not. But if we go in not knowing, but there's a possibility and a willingness and an openness to be shown, I think anything is possible.
Right. I think feel involves learning how to receive, because feel is not something you do, it's something you accept.
It's built on relationship. Right. I think, you know, it's built on a relationship, not even to the horse, but to the horse's movement and to the experience. And I think that's the challenge, is that there's a lot of emotional health that goes into allowing oneself to be open to an experience.
Yeah.
You know? And so I think that like, and that's kind of my groove is working with horses and riders that are who have relegated themselves to the realm of impossible. Because it allows me to go slow. And I have time to develop them, and in that space, I've also been very lucky and to find people who really just love their horses enough to learn how to do what's best for them.
I mean, there's an opportunity in that, working with these really screwed up horses, because, you know, basically you can't make it any worse. Nobody has any expectations, right? And there's no pressure to perform, to succeed, to go to the Olympics.
There's
if you succeed, it's icing on the cake. Exactly.
You can only go, you're at bottom zero. You can, you know.
And I think that for me, because like I'm really thankful, because I have some horses that are really old, and people have seen that or have really horrible stuff happening, and people have seen that I've been able to get them moving functionally and sometimes progressing towards competition.
Awesome.
And now I'm having the opportunity, and my brother has a young horse. I'm having the opportunity now to work with young horses. And I think that for me, in doing the rehab work, you know, movement is the point of reference for a whole horse's world. Like, how they move is really predicated by what they're feeling and what's going on in their head. And like, as the movement clears and as the movement gets better, the mind gets better, they start to breathe, and there's more emotional regulation there. And as a helper of horses in that space and helping them get their bodies back together, it's been a beautiful study in how the body works. To take a really dysfunctional moving part and make it functional and then make it better has been super, super helpful in helping me understand how not to make the mistake that caused that problem.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
You know, and so I mean, and to that end, like, you know, my old guy, he's 19, but you know, he's trained up through the Levade, and I got him with a compromised meniscus and kissing spine in his lumbar spine. Wow. And you know, he's there, you know. And so it's also he's been a beautiful study, and consequently has kind of been my guide through and just understanding the purpose of a thing, the purpose of the movement, you know, the purpose of and how that purpose is really how that purpose is really predetermined by if the horse is willing to be open to the experience of movement in that scary place.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Exactly. Especially if you do something new that they haven't experienced, or if you change their balance, that's often very scary to the horses, I find. And then they hold their breath and they seize up and they get defensive and
had bad experiences with that.
It took me a long time to realize that horses don't necessarily know how many legs they have or where the legs are, or you know,
or how they work.
Exactly. I always took it for granted that they know these things. They're horses, they're born that way, they're supposed to know. And by teaching all these clinic lessons and working with so many different horses of different breeds, I realized that a lot of them, maybe the majority of them, don't really have a very good idea of where their feet are and where the balance is, or that they could change the balance. Like they have their favorite front leg, they always lean on that, and if you take that away, they think you're trying to kill them, right? It's a process for them to realize, oh, I've got 3 other legs, and they don't break off if I lean on them.
I mean, and I think that that's the thing. My mom was talking to me the other day when we were going down to the barn, and she proposed that I consider a question defined as undoing, in the context of my horses, undoing what's already been done to get you back to where you were before you started. And so I mean, and like how that works for me in my brain is that, you know, the horses don't, but some horses really don't understand where their legs are. And like, and so it was super important for me to turn them out with the rest of my herd and just see how they moved, you know, and see kind of what their mental association with their body at, you know, while playing was, and seeing like, you know, and I think that that's the real fun thing, because you know, like it like watching them in the field playing kind of really guides my process, because you begin to see what emotion causes them to move in a certain way, you know. I mean, and then you know, and then it becomes less about telling them what to do and more about like asking and listening and then shaping and reshaping, you know. And like that's and then it begins, then you begin to really understand too, well, I do, that like the emotion behind it that shows up as resistance is truly protection. And so like when we see the behavior, it represents a feeling which represents a need. And so then we're able to start working on root causes instead of trying to fix behavior, you know? And so it's really,
it's interesting that you mentioned that, because that's what I sort of discovered over the years. And for me, that was such a long journey, because, you know, I'm rooted in that European tradition that was shaped by the military for the last 200 years. And it was a very hierarchic structure, very authoritarian, top down, very obedience focused. Like you tell the horse what to do, and if you tell the horse to jump, all he's allowed to ask is how high. And if he doesn't do it, it's because he's disobedient and he doesn't respect you. I had a teacher in the 80s who framed everything in terms of acceptance of the aids, respect, obedience, and submission. Over the years, I realized it has nothing to do with obedience. Like you said, it's often defensive,ness, because they don't really know how to do what I'm asking them to do. They don't see, you know, okay, which leg is next? Where do I put it? And
what does it mean?
So I don't fall down, right? Exactly. And then that makes you slow way down. It's like, okay, wait a minute. If he doesn't even know, you know, where his feet are, so maybe we have to start there. You know, rather than telling him do this shoulder in now or half pass, or you know, we often want something complicated, and then, you know, the horses aren't there yet, right?
and I think in all fairness, like I have to believe, because I mean, that's where a lot of the text is written from, that space too. And so, in the process of doing that, and then just kind of being the type of learner that I am personally, like I don't do well being told what to do and expected to memorize things I haven't been able to ask questions about. I don't comprehend the world like that. And so, I mean, and the right answer, it makes sense to my whole body. It doesn't just make sense to my mind. And so I think that, and it's then beginning to understand that horses take in information in so many different ways. They take in emotional information, they take in energetic information, I mean, on a lot of the horses in rehab, that you begin to understand that, like, they can feel you thinking about asking them a question before you even ask them a question. And so it makes you, I mean, and you think, if you have a horse who's going nice and a proper stretchy chewy, and this horse has trauma around being gathered up. Like, if you think like, now it's time to be gathered up, some of them will totally just, I mean, and so it really helps, I think for me to feel also is knowing where your question is being asked from. What is the intention behind the actual question? And so, and it's like, then the more and more self-aware I think a rider becomes, the more and more the more and more the horse's voice they're able to hear.
Right. Yeah. Now, for me, it's also helpful to think, well, what does that mean to the horse? What I want to do? How does that feel to him? Or
how does it feel?
When you approach him, you say, do this, right? So the horse doesn't know, hasn't read all the books. He doesn't know what I'm aiming for or what the purpose is. He just is confronted with this weird request, or to him it may be completely weird, right? And so what impression does that make on the horse? What is he thinking and feeling when I'm asking that question? Yeah. And of course, sometimes they have no idea what it's supposed to be, and that doesn't make sense to them at first. And then you have to maybe rephrase
it down,
or break it down into smaller pieces, so that the horse kind of has this little ladder that he can climb up. So it's like, okay, this makes sense, and this makes sense, and this makes sense. And then you lead him on this journey. And then when you're lucky at the top, he's like, oh, now it would actually be good idea to do this, right? And then you get something nice,
And I think that so on the opposite end of the pendulum, we have understanding instead of submission.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
And I think that for me, with my goals, I think it's important that horses understand what my questions mean, because then it means that they're not afraid.
Yes.
And I can trust them.
Yeah, it becomes a collaboration. That you do something, you produce, or you do creative work together with a horse, right? The horses make suggestions, and sometimes they come up with ideas that you weren't thinking of, but ideas that are good and valid, right? And you can say, okay, let's go with that.
Instead of going, no, that's not what we're doing today. This is a collaborative venture.
Yeah, and I think, but I also think too, for me, I also need the structure of framework. Like, I mean, I think that's also what I need. So like, if a horse says, okay, let's do this, and I'll go, okay, well, your body you have to use your back like this so it doesn't hurt. So how can we work in this in-between space to kind of figure it out, like what it means? And what is really, really nice that I have found is that, like, when I work with my horses and we're working on more collected movements, like, then those collected movements, because they understand where they come from and where they're going to, they don't use it as an evasion.
Right, exactly.
They'll be like, okay, so this is what I hear you said. This is what I hear you say, and I'm gonna offer this. Is this what you wanted? Instead of like, oh my gosh, I'm scared. This is what I'm gonna do just because I'm afraid of being punished. Then there's no need for it. There's just like, yeah, this is what I wanted, or not right now. Let's try this. You know. And I think that and I think the other valuable part of this for me is that, and I'm not as good of a trainer as I want to be yet, right?
Me neither. Me neither.
And I think, but I think that that's an important thing, because in getting some of these horses in and them feeling safe, you begin to realize where the previous person's understanding stopped.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, I mean, and if it's gonna be an honest and holistic thing, like, you see yourself when you were stuck in that place.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I mean, and so like there's this beautiful place for compassion, and just realizing that, you know, unfortunately, this horse was just part of this person's education.
Right.
And I think what I'm really grateful for is that I have there are other trainers who study with me, and we can really get into the meat of a thing and really collaborate around a movement and how to present it, and kind of talk each other through and help identify stuck points.
Yeah, it's
and the proof that the question is clear is the horse's relaxation and ability to feel safe inside of the question.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so it's a fun spot. It's a fun world.
It's nice if you have the support network where you have like a lab, or like Shana says, a mastermind where you can put your heads together and figure out a problem, you know, and help each other and make suggestions.
Yeah,
it's great.
You know, I mean, because, you know, I just, the horse world is a lot of things that I don't want, that I would not be a part of were it not for horses.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, on that end, like, I have a really hard time processing and making sense of the world without horses in my life.
Right.
You know, they're a fantastic metaphor for my way of reasoning into the world.
I also think we're not the only ones. I also think we're not the only ones that feel like we don't like a lot of what's going on in the horse world, and we can collectively set the stage for
and I think
into a different way.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to see when you don't allow yourself to be the center of the circle.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and I think that like that's a really important concept. Like, if you see yourself as part of the system instead of being what the system revolves around, then you get a whole different worldview. I mean, you see horses and students and other teachers and books. You see it from a whole different perspective.
Right.
And I think the important thing for me is that there's so much room. There's so much more room. And so, you know, if I feel safe not presenting horses that aren't like ideal, but can say, this is where this horse has come from and this is where we're going. And a year ago, the vet, you know, they came to me because the vet said that the only option now was to euthanize them, and now they're jumping. You know, like it's important to feel safe enough to be vulnerable.
That's true.
Absolutely. Yeah. For the horse and
you know. Yeah, it's important to be able to walk into the arena with all of the pieces that you've been able to gather, and they're not all there.
Yes.
To
bring it back to learning to feel, I actually wanted to correlate that to the horse learning to feel too, because shut down horses have learned not to feel, but also they have to learn that to trust and to be okay with being vulnerable, to be in that vulnerable space in order to feel again. And same thing with the student.
Yeah.
And how much time that can take.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean,
how and yeah, it is trauma, and understanding that and I think that that's where the breath is so important for me, because if you breathe into a stuck point, if you breathe into a tight space and you allow your mind to stay there and you're just open to whatever comes, you'll see what emotion is hiding there. And with the writers, as they began to become more and more cognizant of the places that their body is protecting itself away from the breath's inquiry, then their body opens up and they're more available to their horse. And they know, and it becomes, and then the seat becomes more of a means. It's like an ear instead of a weapon.
Right.
It's a tool for which to listen and have a conversation than dictate. And I think that for me, that's kind of the a feeling seat, a feeling even is something for which it listens. Leaders listens, bosses talk.
Right.
I mean, and so just helping people put language to how they see the horse, what the horse means to them, what I have to offer in this space. It really helps them determine, and me determine too, whether or not I'm a good fit in this situation.
Right. Yeah. And in the past, like the traditional teaching method was very much this hierarchic, top down. I give the orders, you execute, and people, dressage riders especially, they always think of the legs and the reins and the seat as ways of giving orders to the horse. A lot of them have never thought about receiving information through the rein or through the leg or whatever, any part of their body from the horse before they give an aid, right? And over the years, we learn to, pick up the reins, put the legs on, sit there, and they listen. It's like picking up the phone, saying hello, and then listen to the other person first before you give feedback or before you ask a question. And over the years, it became a habit for us. But I think for a lot of people, that's a completely strange concept, right? That you listen and you think about what you hear, and then you start a conversation,
Yeah, and I think that you hit on something so incredibly important, in that first you listen and you begin to realize how many people really don't know how to do that.
That's true. Yeah, that's
very true. So I mean, and it's just an observation, like, how many people's lives who come to horses isn't, just built around, getting what needs to be done more than, isn't built around getting what needs to be done being more important than how you feel about getting what needs to be done.
Very true.
It's how the beauty of horses in the way that they behave is that they reflect back to us everything that we want to see and that we don't.
Yeah.
And like, if we really are open to how our horse interacts with us outside of getting a sugar cube or a treat, like, what is the feeling that they give you? What is the feeling? Do they want to be around you? If
Right.
yes,
Right.
how are you feeling in your body when they want to be around you? If no, how are you feeling in your body
Right.
when they don't want to be around you? Because like this is a part of you that they hear that you're not cognizant of.
Right. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and I think the more we can cultivate that self-awareness and that inner space of softness. I've been thinking about this because I had some students in from Minnesota last week, and one of them asked me what I thought lightness was, and I said I think a horse being light is an expression of the outward expression of the rider being soft inwardly.
Yeah, it's a good way of putting it too.
It's not the question, it's the quality of the question.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And
You know.
yeah, made me think that, as dressage riders, it's very easy for us to have an idea. I want to work on this, and you go to the horse, you tack up, and you go to the arena, and we're going to work on whatever, half passes, flying changes, and then we don't actually tune in and listen. It's like, okay, horse, how are you feeling? What do you want to work on? Or what are you ready to do?
Yeah.
It's very
transactional. And I think too, like, how can we have variety with this work? Right. What are the different tempos that we can school our flying changes at? Can we open them up? Can we close them? Can we open between changes? Like what does it mean? What is the quality of the flexion? Like, can you feel the horse's hind legs in your hands? Can you feel the tongue in your fingers? Like these are all, all of those details in the riding process for me are what keep horses interested in working with me. Like what variation, how can I ask the horse to move their body in a way that's fun for them?
Right. Yeah.
And still answer my question. Well, that means that I have to be having fun.
Right. That's true.
It has to be an enjoyable experience. And and I think it was Von Neyendorf that I read a quote. He said, like, I would much rather see a correct trot than an incorrect pee off. It's the joy that the horse's body is expressing, that they want to answer the question. And I think that more importantly for me, like, and this is, and like, that's and if we like use feel as a synonym for listening, like if the receiving of information, like, like when I'm working with my horses and their bodies are healed and now we've moved out of rehab and we can start training, like they start offering stuff. They're like, we did a change, let's do another change. Like it's wonderful. And I think that for me, I think that's why I love my work, because on the other side of that happiness that we all want and are afraid of losing, there's the joy of getting back to moving in a healthy space with each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of good points. Yeah, interesting. Yeah,
I nerd out on this stuff all the time.
Yeah, we do too. Yeah, if you make it safe for the horse to throw out ideas and to suggest something, and then you can tell the horse, oh great, let's do this. Or it's like, well, this is sort of what I was thinking of, but not quite. Maybe rephrase the question. Let's see, get it more to, or you say, okay, not now, not a good time. Let's do it another time,
Yeah.
Or they, do something you didn't expect, and you say, oh, this is great. Do it a minute or two, and then you say, okay, now you had your fun. Let's go back to what I want.
Let's go back. Yeah. I mean, and like I said, it's, I think that this is, I don't have very much experience with the old system of dressage. And I don't have any real I don't have any real experience in the last maybe 10 years with competition, because I've kind of, I wanted to stay focused on my horses in a way in which I didn't fall out of love with my work.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
And so, you know, but I think that when you hear, you know, you'll come up on a passage in Oliveira or Podolsky or something like, or you know, even von Neuendorf in his Art of Horsemanship. Like you can read those places where you just imagine that the space that they wrote that from and the experience that they had with that horse that gave them that feeling was such a beautiful place. It was such a free, inwardly free place where, like, you gave yourself permission to be as at peace as you could. And like when I read that, that's the space that I try and hold as a teacher and offer for my horses and my students. Because like if I can do that, then you become aware of, I become aware of what makes it possible for a person to find that connection to their horse, and how much depends on me creating that space with the tone of my voice, with the cadence and the tempo of my voice, with not being afraid of silence, you know, with not being afraid of emotions, and allowing that softness to become cultivated, so that the horse is not afraid to give us their backs.
Right. Yeah, that's very true.
You know, I mean, and so, but I mean, and you read, and you read it, and you read the respect, you read about the respect that they had for their horses.
Yeah.
And you hear and you see, and you can, in the pictures, you see how when they look into each other's eyes, that outside of every question, there's just love.
Yeah.
And like for me, like that's what I want my process to only be.
Right.
You know, I don't want, you know, and as a, you know, and you know, I don't want my ambitions to lay on the backs of these horses who are trying to give me everything they have. You know?
Yeah, that's such a temptation, isn't it, to use the horse as a vehicle to show off, you know, what a great, you know, virtuoso you are.
As an instrument.
Yeah. That is,
yeah.
It's tempting to fall into that, and then, you know.
Well, I mean, mainstream dressage adheres to this, but that doesn't mean we have to.
No, of course not.
Well, and I look at the friendships that were made, you know, among, I mean, and Klimka was I admire him so much, and so from what I know about him, because, you know, I mean, he especially, I watched that video of the 1990 Ford World Cup on his stallion, and right before he passed, and you just see the joy that they have with each other. I mean, and then you see all the horses coming in who've been rokered, and their knees are popping all over the place, and they can't walk, and it's possible, you know, it's possible to I think to be able to compete and still stay in love.
Right,
I think it's necessary.
I think,
you
so.
know,
When I say mainstream, I don't mean anti, you know, when anti-mainstream doesn't mean anti-competitive.
Yeah, okay, cool.
You can be,
yeah.
I think you can compete and adhere to your principles and be fair and honest and authentic with your horse.
Yeah.
I'm not anti-competition. I used to compete. you know.
Yeah.
It's just
I didn't mean to feel like I was pointing.
This roll cur thing, you know, all of that, but it goes even beyond that. It's even the people that
it's a mindset.
It's its mindset, totally. It's this objectification of the horse. It's this, you know, the disposable horse ownership or using, you know, it's just,
And I think, I felt the fire. I think that I think that I think that the commodification, of horses and riders too.
That's true. Yeah.
Is a very big challenge. And I think that this is where a lot of feel is lost, right? Because, you know, commodified things aren't things that feel safe. They're not herd things. You know, they're like puppets on marionette strings. And everything is associated and attached to product instead of process.
Yes, absolutely.
True.
And I think
money
that
involved, right? Money and prestige, you know.
I think when there's ego involved, I think that when we're at the center of a circle, that's where commodification happens. You know, I mean, because I also think that there are, and I've worked with people who are like, you know, like, give my horse the time they need. And like, I make it very clear for myself, like, at the very beginning, like, if this turns into a situation that I can't feel safe inside of, in working with you, I can't work with you.
That's good for you.
This is good.
You know, I mean, and I think that how we treat our horses is a direct reflection of how we treat each other. And that's why when horses behave in ways that we don't like, I think that's why some folks get so defensive, because, like, it's not working because this is all that they hear.
Right.
You know, I mean, and it's not a matter of finger pointing, but I think that we come to a place, where if we truly want to make progress with our horses, then we have to create space for the partnership to take on its own life in a healthy way.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
You know, where it's not I'm responsible for my horse's where my horse isn't responsible for my happiness in the work. Right? Like, I think that there's a really, really important emotional aspect and an emotional maturity that makes it possible to be courageous enough to say, this is what I felt my horse hear me say. And it's not the answer that I wanted. So the onus is on me to change instead of correct my horse. Feel is directly associated with emotional discipline and responsibility and maturity.
Yeah.
It's time spent. And from time spent, there's trust. And from that trust, there's value in the relationship. And that value becomes a rare thing because it means so much. And I think that for me, and bringing horses back to their bodies and back to their people, I think that it's really important that people understand that horses are capable of such deep relationships. That they're capable of such love that for people that blooms out of their heart, and they offer it to you. And they say, look, like, I may not be what you want, but I'm trying to be everything that I can be for you.
Yes.
That's nice.
And out of that, I think that's where the art of writing starts for me.
Right.
Because like Sunik said in his book, he goes, I have seen horses manage more from their rider's belief in them than breeding.
Right. Yeah.
That was a revelation for me, because I was never, for a long time, I was not able to afford,
of course,
anything that wasn't donated.
Yeah.
Really. And I realized that they were saying no for a reason. And just like people who are protecting themselves say no for a reason. And then I realized, that there are good horses and there are good horses who are suffering. And for me, those are the only types of horses.
That's nice.
Those are the only two types. And when I'm working with the latter, then they grow me as a human being, and they grow my capacity to have an open heart and not be afraid to be vulnerable in a lesson. So I can say, you know what, when I'm talking to a student, like, what did you hear me say?
See, I want to get back to that. I really like that. This question of what did my horse hear me say? Basically, the situation is like you gave an aid, you had something in mind that you wanted to do, and it didn't work out, right? The horse didn't do what you thought you were asking. And it's great to then think about it. Well, what did my horse hear me say? So in other words, what was I actually asking for? What did I think I was asking?
They're two totally different worlds.
Exactly.
They're two totally different worlds. Yeah. And again, it goes back to kind of keeping myself and trying to keep myself in check as far as my ego goes, right? My ego says, this is what I thought I asked my horse say, and my horse didn't give me the answer, and there's no way that I could possibly be wrong.
Right, exactly. I'm the boss. I'm the boss. He works for me.
That's right.
I said.
Yeah, that's right. And the horse is like, exactly right. That is what you said. That is what you said.
And it's hard on the ego, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's hard. but I think like that's the bridge. I think that's the bridge from being that's the bridge from being a really petty person to being a really healthy and helpful human being. And I think
we're
horses
all on that bridge. We're all on
we
that
are. And that's what I'm saying. And I think for me, that's why I said, like, I think that for me is why horses are such magnificent creatures, because they are very good barometers of where you are in that moment in time.
Yeah.
And for me to have these really tough horses, they make it possible for me to then go out and teach. And I'll give one of my students, I'll say, hey, okay, let's do this. And it's not what I wanted. And then I can ask my student, like, this is what we got. What did you hear me say?
Good point. Yeah, it's great.
Right. And they'll say, well, this is what I heard you say. And then you begin to understand what part of the question they didn't understand.
Right.
Not and if you take it apart, right? And I think that's the purpose of the practice. That's the purpose of the education, to take the question apart so that you can understand every piece. And then the answer is you putting those taken apart pieces back in their proper place.
Right.
And so then the lesson becomes a collaborative effort. And instead of me being at the center of the circle with my students, then I'm part of the process. And the attitude that I take with them is then the attitude that they learn to take with their horses. And everybody is in this beautiful synergy together.
Yep, that's it.
And it's a collaboration, not on the execution of a movement, but the understanding of the purpose of the movement.
Right. Yeah.
And then you begin to, and then the proper execution of the movement is proof of the understanding of the purpose.
Right. That's good. That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
You know, I think in that understanding, there's always room for not understanding and clarifying questions.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. You can always ask more questions, ask for more data. So
yeah. And I don't know is acceptable.
Right, exactly.
And it's actually a really important piece. And I think too that it's really important because, you know, then it allows students and horses and teachers to be individuals. Mm-hmm. You know, I think that's a really important sensibility for the heart to maintain.
Very true. Yeah. Yeah, respecting the individuality and finding individual solutions to whatever problems come up, rather than insisting on a mechanical, like, this is what the book says, this is how we're going to do it, you know.
And using the book and understanding that the book was not written for problem horses, but that it does provide a frame, and that it does provide a framework for which to help you understand the process of finding the answer to the question.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, and I think that especially in retraining a horse, you know, they have a paired association already with what an aid means.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I mean, and so they're offering the best that they can. And sometimes it's stopping, sometimes it's blowing up, sometimes it's starting to hyperventilate. And sometimes it can be many things, but it's important to understand that, like, this is the association that they have paired with people asking this particular question. And that's really fertile ground for healing, understanding, and progress.
Very true. And sometimes you have to show them that there is a different way, that it doesn't need to be the way they've experienced it, right?
And I think that on that end, feelingly, you can, if for horses that have trauma, you can feel it when a horse who's used to being reprimanded invites you into chaos.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Just like a child
does.
does.
You can feel them saying, this is the bait that I'm going to throw, and everybody has taken, and this is how I've learned to get out of this question. I'm gonna fight you. And you can say, you know what? No, friend, like, I'm a pacifist. You know, but one, there are some rules that aren't crossable, right? Like, we cannot hurt each other.
Right.
You know, like, we cannot do that. Like, it's okay for you to feel unsafe, but let's and so, like, I have a little pony who I have, his name is Yoda, and he was from a horrible situation, and he used to just run away. Like, he would feel any pressure on the halter and he would run away. And so I took a lesson. We took an hour one day and I taught him how to target. And when he would be afraid and he felt like he needed to run away, I have a big indoor here, and he would go to the other side, and I would set one of these blocks that I taught him to target, and I would set the block out and I would lay a treat on it. And when he was ready to start work, he would walk up to the block and touch it, and then we could
Interesting.
He let me know that he was prepared to start considering questions again.
That's great.
And so I think that, like, if we have situations in which we understand and accept that we're dealing with another creature of very high intelligence, albeit emotional intelligence, there's really beautiful lessons in functional communication.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
but you know, it's fascinating to chat with you. We could do this forever. We had planned though to transition now to questions.
Yeah.
Yes. So for those of you watching on Facebook and YouTube, this is where we are going to end for all of you. We are going to continue a Q&A portion of this with Nahshon, and probably more discussion, because that's the way it always goes. In our Ritterized community, if you are not yet a member and you would like to become one, you just go to artisticdressage.com and it's easy to join on there. You could get immediate access and join us right now. So yeah, come
join the party.
So Nahshon, before we cut that part off, is there anything you would like to say to invite people into anything, or to close that portion up?
Where can they find you?
Yes, well,
right. I'm a fairly I'm a fairly uncomplicated person. Like so you can find me on Facebook, and you know, if you have questions, you can message me there. But yeah, no, I don't really. Thank you.